going to check the two topics. Those are the CLL and the TPR. Those are the next methods that we are supposed to check. And then we will finish with these today. And tomorrow we will work with the last two methods or the last two topics unit. I think we're working with content based and task based and participatory approaches. That's it. Yes, we just have one more topic to check. And today we will work with two of them, right?
Okay.
Okay. Terry, can you listen to us? Are you having problems with your audio or something in your computer?
I listen perfectly.
Okay. All right. So I just paused your microphones so we don't listen to the noise in other houses, right? And anytime you want to speak, I think you can activate it on your own. You can just click on the microphone icon and then you can start talking. If not, please just write a message and or raise your hand or do some movements for me to know that you want to talk. Terry, ya te escuché. Okay, so let's get started with this. I'm sharing the presentation we have for today. But yeah, before the presentation, I want us guys to have like a small talk about the different approaches we're about to learn today, the methods, and but just let me go back with you. Terry's gone. Oh no, what happened to her? Terry's gone. She's back. Hello, Terry. She's gone again. I don't know. I don't know why. But yeah, okay. So let's get started. Before we start with the presentation and with all this information about the communicative language learning and the TPR, those are the two methods for today. Hello, Aurea.
Oh my
I
god.
want us to have like a small conversation about those eight methods. I think maybe please turn your microphone on. Melly?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, now we can listen to you.
Mhm.
Okay. So I want you to tell me a little bit about what you know of those two methods, the CLL and the TPR.
Okay.
You remember in the previous classes I told you to watch video, well, watch two videos on YouTube and start filling your worksheet in with the information about the different methods, right? So, what do you remember? What was like interesting to you? What did you find important? What didn't you know? What did you know about each of those methods? So, I listen to you, please. Tell me.
Fras, estoy ocupada.
Hello, Kathy. It's nice to see
Ay, aquí te la voy a poner.
you. Hi, hi. All right. So, I don't know if my question was clear. If not, I'm going to ask again. In the previous classes, you were supposed to watch those videos about the methods, the CLL and the TPR, and well, you watch the videos and then you answer some questions about the way teachers would evaluate the way the language one was seen and all those things. So, what do you remember about those videos you watched in the previous classes?
Mami, estoy en mi
I need your answers. You didn't do your homework or what?
To be honest, I didn't check them.
You didn't check the CLL and the TPR. But I
No, I'm
think
sorry.
you know something about that, right? I mean, you
And
have
we have
used TPR. Yes, yes. I'm expecting for you to answer. What do you know, Aurea, about those two methods?
can we participate or
Yes, please, please go ahead.
well, what I noticed is, for example, the role of the teacher, that she was like a leader. And at the beginning, the students were really dependent on the teacher, but as it went on, they became more independent. That was one of the things I noticed.
Okay, in the two of them, like in the community language learning or in the TPR, in both.
In the community language learning,
All right, good, good. What other thing did you guys find interesting about this method?
I studied CLL. Well, I watched the video, and the teacher was like leading the class, and at the end of the class, she only say the words, and then they repeat, like
uh-huh.
and they how do you say, like change the way they pronunciate the words.
All right, okay. So they were just following the teacher's models, like the teacher's language patterns, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, and did you find like anything similar with this uh, method and your classes? What you actually do in your classes with your students?
Yes. I think
What is similar?
we are not like you are incorrect. That's not the way you have to say it, you know. So if they say, I don't know, house instead of house, you just only say house. Do you say house? And they say, oh yes, yes, I say house. You know, you don't. You're not like exhibit the kids to when they're incorrect. So
All right, yes.
yeah,
You
that's
don't tell them like, "Oh, that was incorrect." No one is going to understand what you're saying,
yeah, we
right? We
expose.
go like softer.
Yeah,
But I thought it was interesting that she had them write all the words that they knew about the subject, and then she wrote all the words on the board and had them go over all of those words. I thought, and then she had them identify the words that they didn't know, that they didn't understand, and then she like acted them out to help them understand the words.
All right, okay. So you found that interesting,
Uh huh.
and why? Why do you think it's like important to highlight?
Because you use the students' knowledge when they were writing their own words about the topic, and then when they wrote all of the words of all of the students, maybe there were some students that had written some words that other students didn't know, for example. So I think it helped them to have a more vocabulary.
I can't see the teacher.
I can't see him either.
We are all alone. No. Party. Just kidding.
Hi, everybody.
No.
Aurea,
I don't know if you
I don't recognize you. Who are you? The one with the...
Hi, I'm back.
hi.
Hello. Welcome back.
Thank you. Okay, so let's get started with the first method. I don't think we will take so much time today because you had already worked with this individually. So today we just have to to sum up the information. All right.
Okay.
Well, I will just tell
here
you that
some a boy is speaking. I,
next week, I think by Wednesday. No, I think that yeah, Wednesday. You are having an exam. It would be like a quiz about all the methods, and I will design it in a way for you guys to recognize the theoretical foundation, the different activities each of those methods has, and all that stuff, right? So I will go more
everyone can
details about
see
these
and hear you.
later on in the week. So, but I think it would be by Wednesday, whether Wednesday or Saturday next week. So we don't take like any of the days we have for the class. All right. Well, first of all, the community language learning, or also known as CLL, was this method that came to like fulfill the requirements for a specific period of time. Uh, like in the years this method was started to be produced or to be designed, classrooms were even more crowded than before. They had more students because there was like more movement in terms of like moving from one country to another, like a lot of Latin people coming into the United States. So there was like this boom of moving to the States and other like English speaking countries. So then classrooms were bigger, there were more students, and there was more need for people to communicate. No matter what, I mean, no matter like some things like, for example, um, spelling or like reading or writing, they were more worried about letting students speak, like helping them speak. The CLL is considered to be one of those methods who really took into account the whole person. Do you know what the whole person concept means?
The what?
Whole person concept.
Mm,
What is it? What do you understand by whole person?
I
Whole
would think
person?
Yes,
it takes into account the person's feelings. It makes how they react to certain situations, not just the language.
yes, exactly. It is more like well, it considers or it takes into account for specific areas like spirituality, your feelings, your self, like in physical aspect, like your health, your exercise you need to do, and the brain also. So it takes into account like all the areas of a human being to be educated in the perfect way. That's what we know as educación integral nowadays, right?
When they teach you values and all that in the same class.
Exactly, exactly. So this method was the very first one in introducing the whole person concept and the need not just to teach the language but also other important parts of it, right? Like values, traditions, like the cultural background of the language. So everything that has to do with this started in the CLL. Then this method,
So, is
yes,
one of the goals considers all areas of human beings?
it's not one of the goals, but it's more like the like how they conceive education, how they understand education within this method, right?
Oh, okay, okay.
It's the concept of education like a whole person, and also it was based on counseling learning situations. It was more like students were completely active because they were like always burdened with this situation of it's your learning, whatever you need, it's what you will ask the teacher. So you are responsible, or yes, you are responsible of learning of your own learning process. So students would go ask the teacher information about the doubts they have or whatever topic they felt interested about, right? It was not like the teacher giving a specific topic. It was more about the student asking and like looking for the teacher like in counseling sessions. It was more directed to inductive learning, not deductive, and it was like in brief words, this is what theoretically uh, or how we understand the CLL theoretically, right? The goals of this method was for students to practice speaking. It was for them to achieve this communicative proficiency. There is a mistake on the presentation because they wanted students to be able to talk. They wanted them to be fluent in the language and being, how could we say that, like independent users of the language without any need of asking the teacher or a dictionary. They wanted them to be able to talk in a community, within a community of different cultures, right? So there were different roles, as you mentioned at the beginning of this session. The learners and the teachers had to play different roles within this method. For example, the teacher was more like a counselor. The teacher also was acting as a source of information. So the teachers had a very important challenge here because they were supposed to know about many topics, many different topics, as we do now. Because they were supposed to help their students learn about anything students were interested. Like if one of their students wanted to know things about how to like about breeding a dog, for example. So then the teacher was supposed to know words, and the teacher was supposed to know about the topic for him to be able to give that student information. So there was, I think, it was such a difficult task for teachers to get to know other students, right? To start with, like they needed to like to have a survey, or I don't know how they did that, as we do it now, I think, right? Because we are also supposed to know everything about our students, their interests, their needs, and the likes, their dislikes. So teachers were really depending on this information for them to be able to act as a source of information. The learner was seen as a client because he was always like guiding everything in terms of what I do as a teacher. Like the teacher just followed anything that the students wanted, what the students feel interested on, what the students needed. So the learner was the client, and as in any kind of business, clients always have to be like pleased. Whatever the client needs, that's what we give to them. So the school start was became like a serious process thing, or I don't know how to say that. Like they were more worried about like giving a bigger quantity of students what they needed than like helping one student at once. I don't know if I'm making my point clear, but this time within this method, there were more students, so they needed to work faster, to work like not so like so. Just give me a second. Es que hay mucho ruido y me estoy distrayendo y no estoy poniendo atención. Perdónenme. Marcus. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So, yes, within this method, there were more students, so the teacher had to work like not so individually, but like as in a general group. So that's why it was like it was like trying to help students in their special needs, but not so individually. Like not so yes. So they were not worried about each individual. They were more worried about the whole class, right? So there were like also those concepts about what the students were supposed to learn and to be able to do. And one of them is about dependence or independence. The learner's progress started from being dependent on the teacher, like they were so waiting for the teacher to give them everything, like give them the topic, give them the rules, give them the vocabulary, but it was just at the beginning. Like as they went through the course or through the classes, students became more independent, and the students were the ones who selected the topics, even materials. So it was like this process between dependency and independence. Then some of the typical activities we had here were like students started to produce language. But at the beginning, students produced language in their L1, and it was allowed and it was correct, right? Because the teacher understood it was difficult for them to start to speak English or like any other language, like just like that, right? And that's what happens, I think, in modern classrooms. Now we expect our students to talk. Like we tell them the very first class is like, go ahead, tell us your name, introduce yourself. It could be considered as good nowadays, but it wasn't by this time because the teachers really understood and really wanted to respect the silent period that we had talked about before, and what students just can produce. They are just there, like absorbing everything, like learning about the language for them to be able to talk in the future, right? So the students always started to produce language, but in their L1, and they were expecting for they were waiting for the teacher to translate this into the second language. Like it was the teacher's role. The teacher was a translator at the beginning, and he will model that language for them to know how to use it. And also like a lot of linguistic rules and information about the language was required, right? It was because the students needed that for them to be able to create their own concepts, for them to use the language according to what they learned, because they were more not methodical, but they were more rational, I would say. There were other methods in which the students didn't even care about what a noun was, an adjective. They didn't care about those things because they didn't need it. But by this time, students really needed to know information about the language. Okay, so the strengths of this method: students were always the person in charge of starting conversation, and it was considered a strength because the students will guide all the conversation. Like if they started to talk, so they decided the topic, and they decided like everything in the conversation. It was good because you let them be autonomous, and also because you let them be creative. And also the learners were in charge of the topics. They would decide the topics. Like I want to talk about these, I want to talk about that. And then again, it was such a big challenge for the teachers because teachers needed to be ready for any topic the students wanted to talk, especially in terms of vocabulary. I would say it was really hard, and it still is, because if I could say in modern education, like what aspects we can, or yes, what aspects we can relate to other methods from the past, I would say this is the most important one. That the CLL and what we do now is really it's extremely related because we need to be experts in many topics. Whatever the students' ideas are, we need to be ready for them, right? Yes. So, what else? Students. Yes. it was also considered a strength that the class was able to create this environment as a community. And it was not a community in terms of, oh yes, we're friends and all of us love each other, we respect each other. I mean, that was important also, but it was more important because students were able to help each other learn collaboratively, right? They would work in teams, they would help each other, they will build the language according to the group's um, profiles, needs, and interests. And it was really important because we can recognize that this method was really like approaching real life communication. We had a community in the classroom, therefore we need to be able to speak within this community. And it was good because teachers also started to see the importance of students working like in groups as it happens in real life. I mean, every time we go out we need to talk to everyone, so we need to learn how to work in teams, how to cooperate, and also like the different tasks they would have in their classrooms, because they were like getting their students ready for them to be able to use the language outside the classroom. And about the weaknesses, there was not set curriculum, therefore teachers had such a difficult time choosing the topics. Not set curriculum in terms of like the background topics, like the topics we sometimes teach in our classes. For example, if we are learning comparatives, we work with clothes, for example, sometimes, in which you say, oh, this is more expensive, this is better, this is bigger, this is like higher quality. So that background topic was not set. And sometimes not even the grammar content was like very or strictly established. I mean, all of us know that there is a taxonomy, like in which we need to teach our students, because there are some more difficult topics than others, and we also know that some topics are needed to be checked first than others, so your students can understand the next topic, right? So there was not such thing in this method. Everything was like whatever your students need, whatever is interesting for this class, you have to teach them. And yeah, I think it's complicated, right? And it was also tedious trial and error process again, because the teacher would always be there in the classroom, like role modeling, no, like controlling the use of language. Like if you said something wrong, the teacher would immediately correct you until you got it correctly or perfectly correct. So that was one of the weaknesses, or the most important weakness. So comments, questions, situations. So far, so good. Good. ¿Cómo vamos? ¿Vamos bien?
Yes, teacher.
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
All right. So is there anything
What
else?
about evaluation?
What about evaluation? Yeah, that's an important question. What do you think that happened in this method? How do you think students were evaluated?
Well, I think that the teachers were evaluated by, I mean, the students were evaluated by the teacher just observing
Well,
Mm-hmm.
observing the students
the,
in the classroom.
Okay. Yeah. Well, like if you can observe like or analyze the whole thing, like the whole method, then you would understand that there were
well,
not
at the
such.
end of the class,
Uh-huh.
¿Qué number?
Who was talking?
It says the test at the end of the class, the like
The
semester.
feedback at the end of the class,
Uh-huh.
wait, right?
Yeah, there was feedback at the end of the class,
Meaning,
but again, feedback was more like in terms of giving you the tools to improve. I mean, I'm not evaluating you. I'm not like
can
telling
we
you.
use the feedback as
Yes. Can you listen to me? Can all of you listen to me?
okay. Okay.
Yes.
But then I think at the end she had them like
For
write like a paragraph or something using the words. I don't remember.
Yes. Like they were supposed to use the language again in real
yes,
life situations, like life
but you can
situations. Who's talking? Who's speaking? Aurea,
Aurea,
is that you? Aurea?
she's typing something. I think
Yeah.
her mic is not working.
Es que como que de repente la conexión falla
Se
y
corta.
sí,
Exactly.
sí. But don't worry, we understand that, right? Well, culture, I'm going to tell you things about assessment and culture, right? Culture within this method was really important because language was for communication. So again, if we wanted our students use the language like in a good way, so they were supposed to know like the background about that language, right? Some of the language we use um, is a representation of the cultural aspects or the cultural factors in a society. So culture was really important, and it was taught with language, like at the same time, right? Like all those things about traditions, beliefs, like different sayings or different words people use. And what do you think about feelings? Do you think it was difficult for students to work based on this method in terms of feelings?
Well, I think she always responded in a positive manner to the students' comments.
Hmm. That's true, and that's I think Kathy said that right. Like we cannot tell them like, ah, there is a mistake, you did it wrong. No, like teachers were supposed to listen and respond to each comment carefully, like taking their students' feelings into account. And I think it was not such a big deal for students because at the beginning they were allowed to use L1. So anytime you use your mother tongue, it is helpful for you to start building this confidence you need later on to produce the language, right? But I would say it was also difficult for the teacher, especially in those multicultural countries, because there are students from different countries, different cultures. So not all of them share the same language. But that's what happens in some language schools in the United States. For example, I went to the, ¿cómo se llamaba? Era el Language Center for Culture for Multicultural Students. And the groups were like, students were grouped depending on their mother tongue. There was this Spanish class, right? They all of them were learning English, but all of them like had in common the mother tongue. Some of them were from Colombia, from some other from Venezuela, some other from Mexico or Spain, but they were together in the same classroom because the teacher who was teaching them English was Spanish, spoke Spanish, so it would help. And about evaluation, there was not like a specific form of evaluating students within the CLL method, uh, but evaluation was conducted through keeping the principles of the method. So if you remember the principles here of this method were like the whole person concept. So students would not just have like a grammar test and that's it. So they would show they were able to respect like all the competencies that we see now in our modern curriculum. So they were taking into account the whole person concept and also like group activities because this was a community. So students would work a lot in groups, and evaluation had to be like the same, right, for them, like in community, in groups, like role plays. All right. So students would be asked to grade a paragraph. Yes. So it was more about production rather than answering questions that had to do with grammar or with language features. So this was more about using the language, producing the language. All right. And there was a lot of self-evaluation processes within this method. Students were supposed to check their their own progress. Okay. Anything else you want to add? I think this CLL is really interesting, and it's really
Verme.
similar to what we do now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Kathy, questions?
No,
So far, so good.
it's okay. Thank you.
Perfect. Melly,
Teacher, what
Amel.
about the skills? Understanding, speaking, or listening?
Oh, yes. I think I didn't tell you that, right?
But I think that included all of the skills, no? Basically, but the
Yeah.
primary one was speaking, no?
Speaking production was the most important, like fluency. Like they were more worried about these than the others, but they were necessary. I mean, reading, writing, like all of them were necessary because they saw language as a communicative situation. So yes, all of them were used, but the most important, or they were worried about students using the language in an oral way. Yeah, we mentioned it at the beginning. Good, Melly. Any other question?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Just hold on because this thing is slow. Siempre pasa que cuando estoy jugando, perdiendo el tiempo, mi computadora es veloz, pero no se trata de trabajar, que se duerme.
Está de vacaciones, teacher.
Sí, ya. Oigan, de veras, hasta yo me quedé pensando, pero dije, bueno, ya quedamos de acuerdo. Creo que hoy estaba marcado como día de asueto, ¿no? En su calendario para la universidad.
En el
Sí.
calendario sí venía este fin que no. Pero
Bueno.
ya ni sabemos en qué día vivimos, así es que vale.
Pues yo pensé que no era prudente cancelar porque pues también tenemos el tiempo encima. Entonces dije, más vale que aprovechemos estos días y que después nos vaya a hacer falta el tiempo.
Así es.
Sí, better. Okay. It's working now. All right. Now, the TPR. I think all of us know what TPR is because I think most of us have worked as English teachers in elementary school. So this is like what we use for kids, right? It's the favorite method for students, for kids especially. Well, the total physical response was a method that linked or tried to link like two different parts or two different kinds of language. The the spoken language and the physical language, and more mental or brain processes, right? In here, L1 was seen as L2. So the construction of a new language for students was similar to how their students learned the first language, the mother tongue, right? You know, when a kid is learning a language, you point at different objects, you make the movements. Kids also move a lot when they're very little because that's the way they represent the language, right? So here language was connected with physical action. Every time people talk needed to move also. They thought it was like this important connection that made students find meaningful um, like meaningful the words and meaningful the structures anytime they moved and talked. So the goal here was main like most importantly, listening comprehension because they wanted their students to know or to understand what other people said so they could move or they could like react with their bodies. And oral communicative skills. If you can see the last 3 or 4 methods were more worried about communicative oral communicative skills more than others. It was because yeah, language started to play an important role in terms of oral communication, right? Like English, I'm sorry. So those were like the goals for this method. So the TPR had also different roles for teachers and learners. This method was completely teacher directed because the teacher was telling the students what to do. The teacher was giving the students like those commands, or how can I say that? Like imperative sentences, or yeah, imperative commands for them to act, for them to do something. And learners were just receiving the instructions and responding through the modeled language, right? They were supposed to know how to react. And the typical activities within this method were, for example, imperative commands given to learners like stand up, move your hands, and all those things. And learners responded with actions. And most important, of all of those, I think the role plays, right? The role plays were really important, and they still are because we can use them a lot to have students using spoken language and also using the language meaningfully. The strengths of for this approach were low anxiety situations. The students were moving. Students didn't see language as a big task because it was just like it's easy. We have to move. We have to repeat. There's nothing I have to do with my brain, like very difficult. So it was easy for them. And learners were not forced to speak too early because within this method, again, the silent period was considered. The TPR weaknesses, we can say that there was a big advocacy for the silent period. The teachers would say like, "Oh, they are not ready to talk, so let's just have them role play, repeat. There's no need for them to create language because they're in the silent period. There's no need for them to feel stressed. They're learning." So I would say they would underestimate their students. And these kind of methods were seen after the first weeks. It means that students didn't take advantage of it like by the 6th or 7th week as they did at the beginning. Because at the beginning, everything was new, everything was like attractive, but then they would go like again the same. We have to stand up, we have to move, we have to, right? I think this thing doesn't happen with kids because kids love these a lot. You could do this like all the year, the school year, and nothing will happen. I don't know if you agree, but kids are more like they need more this kind of methods. And there was another emphasis on physical actions, right? A lot of movement, a lot of physical interaction. Okay, so I would like to listen to you guys telling me your comments, your questions, your doubts,
Mhm.
your complaints, your concerns.
I think it could be challenging for shy students. You know, they don't like, some of them don't like to move, or they're like, don't like to be seen from the rest of the class.
Okay, so
So
you would say it would be difficult for students in terms of anxiety and feelings, right? Like
yeah, they are shy.
some of them might feel like ashamed.
Yeah.
And how could you work with that? I mean, what would you do?
That's a difficult question. I have a shy girl that she's like, I can barely hear her, but
Hmm.
I try every time to give her the opportunity to move or to speak, but it's very hard. So that's why I'm asking you that this is challenging from some of those kids.
Yes, I would say like it's difficult, or it's how could I say that? It's not common to find those kids who don't like to move, like shy kids, but there are some,
Very
right?
hard. Yeah.
And it is easier for teachers to integrate them into the class when these things happen with kids.
Yeah.
I have been working with a student. She's 16 years old now. We've been working for a year more or less, and she doesn't want to talk because she's ashamed and she's shy. And it's very difficult because I give her the chance to talk, and we can be there waiting for her like 10 minutes, and she doesn't talk. And that is hard for everyone because the other students also feel bad about it, and yeah, like a bad atmosphere starts in the class. So it's hard. I think it's harder with the adults than with
Because
kids.
when she writes and when she has to read, she's good at it. So she knows the language, but she doesn't like to move or to talk to the rest of the class. So that's like, oh my gosh, it's frustrating.
Yes, but that has to do more with her personality, right? Not with her
Exactly.
skills.
Yeah.
So that's why, again, the last method, and I also think this one, take that into account with the whole, what was it? Whole person, right? With the
Yeah.
whole person concept. It's not just about language. It's also about confidence. It's also about how you feel, right? So teachers were now supposed to help their students in those things, in those kinds of situations, right?
Yeah.
Good, Kathy, good.
But I think in generally, small kids really like this method because it's like getting them involved. It's like hands-on practice. I mean, I listen to the teacher and I know, and it's an easier way for a teacher to evaluate their comprehension because you're seeing them do the different actions that you see, that you say.
Yes, it's very active, and I think, as you said, that it's one of the methods that gives you immediate feedback of what you are doing as a teacher,
Exactly.
because you can see, you can identify if students really understood what you tell them. And yeah, I think it's positive in this aspect, right? You can immediately know if the students understood or not. So I would say
Mhm.
that is an advantage. But
And also, I think it's like how like babies acquire knowledge. You when you're a mom and you tell your kid, "Oh, sit down right here," you go and you sit them down, and they understand that what you're saying is sit down. Okay, it's this action, no, and it's kind of like acquiring the same way as you would acquire a native language.
Mhm. But I would say that helps students to acquire basic language, like
Mhm.
just basic things, right? But they cannot understand like more difficult concepts, such as, let's say, mm, I don't know, but let's say love, which is to me a difficult concept to define. I mean, they would understand love. It's anytime your mom does these, but what about the rest, right? What about loving a couple, loving a friend, loving a yeah? They would need a different method to learn all those meanings of language, right?
Mhm.
And I also wanted to say something about this. Yeah, I mean, all of us have used. Perdón, voy a gritarle a mi perro.
About evaluation.
Yes, I was going to tell you about yes, the TPR. That we have, like, all of us have worked with it, I think, and we know it works. Like, it's helpful. It helps, especially in discipline things, right? Because your students are more concentrated, they are more ready to work because they're moving, it's active, and blah 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 blah. But could you imagine a whole uh, course or a whole semester or a whole unit based on TPR? Would you
No.
would you like to work like that all day during a month, during 6 months? What did you think about that?
I think you
Students are gonna be tired
Why tired?
because they like to move, but not all the time. Imagine 1 month working with TPR method. The complete month, they're gonna be tired. They like to move, but not all the time. We need to combine or to give them some other different activities. For example, in elementary school, in our program for PRONI, Programa Nacional de Inglés, we
Mhm.
have a unit that says commands. And you need to say to the students, stand up, sit down, pick up your pencil, write, erase, and all of those. And they need to make the movements,
Okay.
but not all the time you have to do it with TPR method. So you need to include activities, I think, that, for example, match activities, or they need to write something, or cut and paste, or all of those activities that are different from TPR.
All right. Good. So TPR.
Also, I don't think PPR is helps them with their speaking in any way. It's just basically listening.
Could you repeat it, please?
I don't think that this method helps them with their speaking skills. It's basically just listening and learning vocabulary and understanding comprehension.
Yeah, I agree with you. But except for the part of the role plays, because TPR, like the whole thing, the method includes TPR as one of the favorite activities for teachers, like within this method. So I would say, like, not all the TPR method helps for speaking production, but role plays, right? But at
Right.
the end of the day, I wouldn't dare to say that is completely speaking. It goes more for sub skills like pronunciation, intonation, fluency. But at the end of the day, students don't know what they're saying in a role play sometimes, right? They could
Right.
just memorize whatever comes in their script and that's it. They're not speaking. They are producing language orally, but they're not consciously speaking.
True.
So yeah, I would say CPR was, or it helps in terms of vocabulary, and that's what we do now. As that's the reflection I want you guys to start thinking about. That in modern methods, we use a mixture of all those methods we have left in the past, right? From TPR, I would say that we could highlight vocabulary learning because it helps a lot to memorize vocabulary. Do you remember this method? I don't remember it, but it's the one that says class, class, and all of them say yes, yes. What is it? Russia, Russia's, or something like that?
About
I don't know.
I think,
Russia's method.
yes, it's the Russia's method, something
It
like
is
that.
a power teaching method, no?
Yes,
It
power.
is power teaching.
Yes, and for everyone, I think to memorize vocabulary better, we need realia. We need to move. We need to link this with, like, to link words with something meaningful. And we discussed that in the part
Exactly.
of linguistics, like a couple of months ago. You remember? that there we need a reference sometimes to understand something and to memorize that part of language. So I remember I had an activity to memorize names
Yes.
of my classmates. We were like 20 something people there, and they asked us to say our name, but like with movements, or like, yes, it was with movements. And I remember I could memorize most of my classmates' names just because of their movements they did, right? And all of us had to be creative with the word and relate it with a movement, with a sign, with something, so people would
Second.
memorize the names. So that's TPR, and it helps, right? And situations like these could be seen in all the methods, like what we take from all of them to make a better method now, like a complete method to help all kinds of students to learn a language, right? Okay, more comments, questions?
Me,
So what about the students? I don't think he hears me.
Okay.
I don't think he hears me.
He's like,
Exactly. Oh,
Aurea
he comes back.
Aurea is useful. Aurea
He
is,
does the same way.
I can listen to you.
Okay. Okay, so you can hear me. The question is, what about the use of the students' native language? Do they use? They don't use it in the TPR.
In the TPR, that's a good question. Uh,
I'll eat it.
Oh,
Where's the teacher?
I don't know.
he's having problems.
He got lost. Hello.
¿Sí me escuchan ahora?
Yes.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Me
he's
fui y no
getting,
me di cuenta. Yo seguí hablando y no. Okay, I'm sorry. Well, the native language in TPR was usually introduced by the students. I mean, the students would use it, right? But the teacher rarely would continue using the mother tongue. What would the
Okay.
teacher do was like to what the students said in their mother tongue would be translated into the target language, and the teacher would try to help students use the language, like the target language, but not their mother tongue, right?
Okay.
So just sometimes it was used to clarify, because the only resource there, or the strongest resource there, was movements. So if movements didn't work, the second resource teachers had was translation. But again, like sometimes teachers would have those big multicultural classrooms in which languages were different: Japanese, Chinese, Italian. So sometimes mother tongue wouldn't help at all.
Okay.
All right. Any more questions or comments? Did you hear the beginning that I told you about the exam we're having next week?
Yeah.
wait,
Okay.
yeah.
We're having an exam. I'm not sure if it would be whether Wednesday or Saturday. I prefer to have the exam on Saturday, so we can have like some review for it, right? The exam
This
will
Saturday or the next Saturday? This
No.
Saturday or next Saturday?
next Saturday, next week.
Okay.
All right. After Friday's session, we are having this exam, right? I'm
Are
going.
you to ask you questions or how? Ask us, sorry.
It would be a Google form.
Okay.
Yes, and yeah, you will see.
Are we gonna have a time limit to answer this, or?
Yes. Well, whether we do it in Google or Kahoot, I'm not sure yet because we need videos and pictures. So probably Kahoot is our best option. But yeah, I will let you know. So there will be a time for you, like a limit time for you to answer.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Only about
Yes, it's just about methods and
Okay.
also learning and acquiring too.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. The differences between learning and acquiring language?
Yes,
Okay.
and then the methods. Okay.
Okay.
Well,
And how many methods have we seen so far?
yes, like I think we've checked 7 or 6 methods. No,
Okay.
7.
And how many are there in total?
Just 7.
Just 7?
Yes.
Yes. We're seeing another next class, but it's not like a method. It's more like an approach. But yeah, you will see it next week.
Okay.
All right. So thank you very much, all of you. Today was more difficult than last class, but I think everything came up well. So
Okay.
Thank you.
take
Thank
care
you.
of yourselves. Thank you.
We're gonna be tomorrow on the next at 7 o'clock, the same
Yeah.
time?
7 o'clock again.
Okay.
Okay. See you later.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Yes.
Bye.